sympathy, I just tape myself up a little bit and I got it. All right. We are in 1 Peter chapter 5, and very possibly we'll finish with 1 Peter this morning. Go on, Lord willing, next week into 2 Peter. That's all in the realm of maybe right now. With Peter, he's talked about humility in this chapter, and he nails it down pretty good in that he talks about everyone, actually, although he specifically mentions the elders as an office in the church. He mentions just older men, I believe, and then he talks about younger men in verse 5, likewise be subject to your elders. And then he says, all of you, clothe yourselves with humility toward one another. This is in verse 5. For God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, verse 6, therefore. So with these thoughts in mind of humility, and it includes everyone, humble yourselves, everybody. And it's a nice place to humble yourselves when you do it under the mighty hand of God. It's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing. With this of pride. Pride is observed when we see ourselves being impatient. I think that's a clue. I am everything that revolves around me. I want it for me. I want it now. Impatient. And that's pride, the opposite of humility. Humility will help us to bide our time, take our time, trust in God for His good time, and allow things to go along more in that realm. Sometimes an occasion will be so that I don't have time to be patient. Lord, help me right now. My car is going round and round. Help me right now. I can't be patient. All right. So humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. So if we exalt ourselves, God will humble us. And we should be very grateful that He's willing to do that. That's Luke chapter 14. If we exalt ourselves, God will humble us, and we need to be grateful for that. Okay, we get to verse 7, where it says, casting all your anxiety on Him. Now this business of casting our anxiety on Him and our cares, and because He cares, that isn't going to happen. He's not going to take such good care of us like we'd like unless we fulfill the requirements of verses 5 and 6. We have to humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your anxiety on Him. We have no right to ask God to take care of our anxieties unless we're willing to humble ourselves under His mighty hand. And it's as though it's a privilege, I'll say a privilege earned, and it's a wonderful thing. All right, with this in verse 6, therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you. And we do have to look at the last little phrase here, at the proper time. God won't and doesn't bless us until we have placed ourselves under His great care, His great hand, His mighty hand, And then it becomes the proper time for him to do what he will do for us. If we try to rush it, well, we find out that it doesn't happen. So we have to be patient. We have to take our time. We have to let God do his work. And work on our lives, or whoever else is involved in whatever our situation may be. Because God knows best. We have trouble with that sometimes, I think. But God does know best. Now, there's one... Okay, verse 7. Casting. Fishermen. Do we have fishermen here? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, but the last time out it wasn't real good. Casting.
We don't have catchers, we just have fishermen. The difference between fishing and catching.
Is there? Oh, okay. Yeah, see, he works in the medical profession. That's casting is entirely different there too. Casting. Throwing it out there in the right place. You know, you stand at a stream or even a fairly wide river and you watch fishermen and they're casting. Those on the west bank are trying to reach the east bank. Those on the east bank are trying to reach the west bank. Why? I don't know. Because the further away you can get, obviously, the more chance you have of catching a fish. Somehow. All right. And if you ever go fishing in a bay and you happen to snag something or catch a fish or get one on, suddenly you have lots of company. They're right there too. They're casting about 4 fish. Okay, with this, casting, that is looking for, trying to get a hold of, dealing with it. So cast all your what upon God? Anxiety. What else? Cares. What? Worries. Okay, all of these things, you're all right. But this is what we want God. We're not trying to snag our cares and our anxieties. We're trying to throw them to God. And we really need to do that and to let him do what he will with them. Are we willing? It's hard. It's hard. It's mine to deal with. It's right there. It's in front of me, and I want to take care of it. That's natural. And even when we know it's best to let God do it, it's still, I want to do it. And sometimes part of it is ours to deal with. That requires, the only word I know to use is wisdom. It requires wisdom. We've talked about patience, also requires patience. It requires letting God do what God will do. There's one reason that we ought to know that this will work. And it's the last of that verse. Because he cares for you. He really cares for you. When your children or grandchildren, hang in there, John, come and they want something, it's a real trouble to them and they want you to fix it. What are you going to do? You'll do the right thing. Either give them what they want, or withhold what they want, deal with their problem, whatever, because you care for them. God cares for us. He knows what's best. He'll do what's best. We may not like it then, but he'll do what's best. Because he cares for you. There's here in this book in chapter 2 and verse 12, Keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, as they observe them, glorify God in the day of visitation. So we have a responsibility to others at times. See, the day of visitation. And here in this, He'll exalt you at the proper time. We aren't, see, we have to be patient. When we're impatient, that's what I said at the very beginning, that's when we're showing that we're not humble. We're going to take care of this ourselves. We can do it now. We don't have to wait for God. He's too slow. That's pride. And so to show people Christianity, we have to behave ourselves all the time, so that at the right time they will glorify God, because they have seen our example. And then also here in this in this verse, that God will exalt you at the proper time, casting all your anxieties on Him, because He cares for you. Now we get down to a well-known verse that has been kicked around quite a little bit, but it isn't difficult to understand. I don't think, not even a little bit. But you know, before I get into that, who wrote this book?
Peter.
Peter wrote the book. Now, with Peter, did Peter have any experience along the line of trusting Jesus?
Yes.
He did. Can you name somewhere in the Scripture where Christ treated Peter special by way of even a miracle?
Walking on water.
Peter walked on the water. I found that that's a miracle. Yes, it is. And Peter needed it right then, didn't he? Yeah, he did. Okay. Anything else? How about Peter's mother-in-law? Was she a miracle? No. What did Christ do for Peter to her? What? He healed her. That's right. Peter healed her. So, you see, Peter's had some experience here where God is taking care of him. We talked about fishing. Peter was a fisherman. And of course, a fisherman, if he catches what he kind of figures he ought to, that's all well and good. But suppose he got so many fish that he began to break his nets. Is that a miracle?
Yes.
Well, it would be in my, yeah. All right. Another fishing thing with Peter. Peter had to pay some tax, and he didn't have the money to pay the tax. What did Christ do for him? Yeah, send him out fishing. You go down there, you get a fish, open its mouth and bring out the tax money. Really? Okay, well, the first miracle would be just doom and getting the fish. And of course, the right fish, yeah, and the right amount of money. Well, sure. Christ is taking care of Peter. Bailed him out, too, a couple of times. Once in the Garden of Gethsemane, what did Peter do to Malchus? Whoosh! And Christ put the ear back on. Peter, don't do that. And he bailed him out one more time after Christ's resurrection, after Peter had been serving Christ. Peter had been speaking out really boldly for Christ, and he got himself thrown in prison for it by the Jewish rulers. And what did Christ do? He sent an angel, and he took Peter out of prison. Peter, but boy, this is a vivid dream. But wow, yeah, even the kick in the side, you know, this is a vivid dream. And the gates are swinging open. Wow, this is really some dream. And it wasn't until Peter got clear out of prison And he was standing there all by himself suddenly in the morning cool. That was no dream. So all of these things Christ did for Peter. Now, all of it showed Peter what? That God, Christ, cared for him. So when Peter wrote this, cast all your cares, all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. Peter could write that, and can you visualize as he wrote that down? He said, boy, folks, you don't know the half of it. You really don't. And I think sometimes that's our situation. We don't know half of what Christ does for us every day. Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. He gives us courage, wisdom, strength, faith. The list goes on as we try to get through life. Well, I got to go on here with the next verse. Be of sober spirit. Be sober. Ever have a sobering experience? We can go along and visualize your. I think most all of you here are drivers. You drive in your car and you can go for hours on end. You know, it's kind of a really interesting and a beautiful trip between here and Las Vegas. But sometimes people can kind of get drowsy. And of course, there's different things now that are coming up in the cars. If you're drowsy, it knows you're drowsy, and it does something to sober you up. But other things can happen. You're driving along, and I was in California one time, just kind of a mountain road going along, and it was 1, 2 in the morning, and at 1, 2 in the morning, I got to work to stay awake. And I was fairly awake, and a big buck deer right there in front of me. And at 60 miles an hour, things can happen fast. And I managed to miss it, or it missed me, one of the two, or both of us. Sobering experience. I was awake after that. I mean, I was awake. The rest of the trip, I was awake. So were all my passengers. You remember that, Mrs. Poe? We had Tiff and the boys in the car. We were going up to Oregon. Anyway, sobering experiences. Be sober. Be alert. We have to be in life. Things come at us, and we need to be ready for them. You can't be ready for them if you're just drowsing along half asleep. Now, you can think in your own head of experiences where you were suddenly awakened. I mean, wide awake all of a sudden. Ever had a smoke alarm go off in your house in the night? Oh. If you've ever had that experience, I mean, you can go from sound sleep to bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Boom! That's what they're designed to do. Because if it was for real, you may not have very long. So get right at it. A sobering experience. So he says here, be of sober spirit. That is, be wide awake. Be on the alert. So that's kind of like underlining it. I said it, I'll say it again. Here it is. Your adversary. You have an enemy out there. You have an adversary. The devil. Ask Job. He got a first-hand lesson in what the devil can do. Ask Peter when he realized, he woke up and he realized it was the devil. Boy, and he made me deny my Lord. And there are many examples that we could give of the devil and what he does. Was Eve half asleep in the garden? Well, we could say, and we use the phrase, she was asleep at the switch. Sometimes switches have to be flipped to on. Boy, you know, I mean, I need everything I've got here. And she didn't have it. And he got her. He did. Satan, the devil, says, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. There are three ways, forms, as I looked at this, that the devil takes. The one was the subtle serpent in the garden. The beguiler, the one that kind of twists things and goes around and perverts our own judgment, and he did Eve's at that time. A snake. How many of you ladies really like snakes? Raise your hand real high so I can see them. So can everybody else. None of you really like. How many of you just are neutral about snakes? How many of you really don't care for snakes? We had a boy here in school for a while that had a snake, pet snake. I don't like pet snakes. And I don't know if it's natural that people don't like snakes or if it's kind of inborn. When I was, I don't know, I was about in the 7th grade. I was helping my grandpa clear some brush on a field he had. And the brush was it was berry vines. And they grew in just round clumps, maybe 5–10 feet through, and just like berry vines grow. And there were several of these clumps around his field. He says, I want you to go out there and clear off some of those. So he gave me this axe-like thing, only had a big hook on the end. He called it a brush axe. And I can white and black and white and black and white and on and on. And it had to be as big, as round as a man's leg. And it was 100 yards long. I'm sure it was. It was huge. And to my grandpa, and I sputtered, black, white, black, white, black, white, and pointed. And he said, oh yeah, that's a king snake. And I said, yeah, he was the king of snakes, all right. And he said, now just calm down, go get your axe and go back out there and do what I asked. Back out, Grandpa, really? Mm-hmm. So I back out, but I thought I'll go to a different clump. Maybe I'll give that one a chance to get old and die or something. And so I went to the next one, and about the 3rd swipe, there's another huge snake. This one was bigger and longer and meaner looking. And I'm back to Grandpa this time, and I sput. He says, oh, another snake, huh? Yeah, another snake. And he said, well, why don't you go do something else? To this day, snakes don't really, they don't charm me at all. I stay away from them myself. And you think I'm a real skittish around snakes? You ought to see my wife. Yeah, she really doesn't like snakes. Okay, snakes. That's one form. The other, as an angel of light. Can you imagine? He went from a snake to an angel of light. Enlightenment. He knows he is good. Why, boy, oh boy, he knows spiritual things, false views of spiritual things. He's an angel of light. refinements in the King James Version, 1611, they didn't translate a simple word. They transliterated the word, difference. To translate means to take it from one language, bring it to another, and keep the meaning. Transliterate means kind of use the same sounding word and give it a meaning. They transliterated immerse. Baptizo to baptism. They should have translated baptizo to immerse. To this day, that's not a very big deal. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, now we can sprinkle, we can pour, we can ignore it because it isn't that important. It's embarrassing in public. All kinds of things. Now that's both the subtle serpent and the angel of light, and what he'll do. Well, the Lord's Supper every Lord's Day. Well, isn't once a month sufficient? We don't want it to get old. We don't want it to be not meaning so much to us because we do it so often. But let me tell you about breakfast. I don't like to miss breakfast. Never has gotten old. Now, it seems like every time I go to a doctor, he says, I want you to have a blood test. I'm fast. All right, what time is the blood bank open? Can't we find an earlier one? No, whatever. So it is. And then, oh, yeah, the one we have here. So we've looked at it as the serpent and the angel of light, and now a roaring lion. Does Satan really have chameleon qualities? He can fit himself into the occasion. Everything from a snake snakes are, one thing about snakes, they're quiet, I think, for the most part. I don't know if there's a noisy snake, but we view them as quiet, sneaking around and so on, to a roaring lion. And here we have in this, be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, this is personal, your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion. See, he's like a snake. He's like an angel of light. He's like a roaring lion. He isn't physically observable as this or this or this. But he's like this, and we get the point. We can see the picture, like a roaring lion. What's a roaring lion in your mind? Well, when he's on the prowl for food, don't stand around looking like lunch. Yeah, and so, but that's the way we should view Satan. The devil, boy, don't stand around looking like an easy mark. Like you're half asleep spiritually, morally. Okay. Anything else here? Yes, Jerry.
On that sober spirit, due to several auto accidents over the years, I know that one alcoholic drink lowers your reaction time like 10%. So you're less alert. So I think people that consider alcohol, this would be a verse that they should think about, because if you're not as sober or as alert, if you have one drink, and then besides all the trouble it causes in the world later on, one drink is where it starts.
You have to start with the first one and go from there. But the first one is bad.
Then just to dovetail on what Jerry said, that when you say that, you know, the devil's like a lion, and they choose the weakest prey. So if you're sober, if you're not sober-minded and you're at that point where you're weak to something, very easy to be prey to the devil and his ways. Not just with alcohol, but with not being vigilant in what you're doing every day.
That's why he uses the phrase both sober and alert. Yeah. Yeah, just be as sharp as you can be. Okay. And it's always seemed to me as the height of, I don't know the right word, stupidity, negligence, to see a guy get into an airplane drunk. I mean, to fly an airplane, you best be on your best. That's good enough if you're really good. But if you're kind of about half out of it, you're done. That was brought to my attention. It wasn't long after we moved here. There was about an airplane took off from the Truckee Airport. No, the Tahoe Airport. There's an airport up there. And people will fly in from the valley, and they'll have a nice dinner, and then they'll take their plane and fly home. Well, they had a nice dinner and drinks. And you see, that's a high elevation. Planes don't fly as well when the air is thinner. And pilots don't fly as well when the brain is thinner. You put those two things together, and the guy took off and splash into Lake Tahoe. Killed them all. They drowned or died in the crash. But you see the stupidity of it. Be sober. Be alert. Now, that's a physical example, but how many people, how many Christians have wrecked themselves because they weren't alert? They got into something, and you see it in the news all the time now. Use the example of it. Guys, when they have pretty secretaries, or they're around lovely ladies who are always at their best because they're professional people and they look nice and stuff, and in a weak moment, they're not alert, they're not caring, maybe they've had a drink or two, and they do things that wreck them. Yeah, just wreck them. Okay, and there's so many examples, because the devil is consistently and constantly at this business of seeking someone to devour. Eat them alive. But resist him. See, there's a way out. We don't have to have this problem. We don't have to give in. We do not. Resist him. How do you resist him? Firm or firmly. That's how you resist him. You don't go about it as if, well, it doesn't really matter. Resist. Stop. Okay. You ladies that are cooks, if you have an electric stove, you have on the top, we call it the burner, well, propane tube or gas too, but this is electric. All right, you turn on the electricity. What causes the electricity to make that burner turn red? Any electricians out here?
Resistance.
Resistance. Come on, Ralph. Resistance. And when you get a metal that makes that causes resistance, that's what makes that electricity work. Do something. If you don't have any resistance, it's just going somewhere else. And that's the devil. You resist him, hey, it'll work for you. It'll give you some spiritual heat. Yeah. Resist the devil. Resist him. Firm in your faith. You believe that you can do this. Well, right back into to verse 7, casting all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. He cares for you. You resist the devil. God cares for you. And the result will be you resist him firm in your faith. Now, but you don't know the trouble I've had. You don't know. I mean, I've had temptations and I've had troubles that nobody else has had. And it's just so hard. You can't know how hard it is because you just don't know this. You need to not be so hard on me because you just don't know. But resist him firm in your faith, knowing that the same experiences of suffering are being accomplished by your brethren. What do you mean to say what no one has to face what I have to face? Well, I'm sorry. If realizing, and this is what it's intended to do, if realizing that, hey, you're not alone, others know, others have been there, there's no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man, then that'll help. And in particular, realize that Jesus Christ was tempted in all points like as you are, yet without sin. It's one of the reasons he came to earth, so that we would know. He's been there. He suffered it. He had to go through it. And I might add this, and more. And yet, he did it. So, all of this is designed to help us, not to make us feel like, well, man, I must really be a wimp. No, it's all designed to help us. And that's why Peter's writing this, resist him firm in your faith. Knowing that the same experiences of suffering are being accomplished by your brethren who are in the world. They're here now. They have to deal with it. And they do, is the implication. They do, so you can. You don't have to just roll over and play dead. Okay, any comments? Yes, Jerry.
One way to be firm in your faith is to associate with other fellow Christians, so that they're trying to resist the devil. Together, you can uplift each other. You can help each other instead of isolating yourself or putting yourself with a bunch of worldly people that are you know. So if you change your friends, change your associates to be as much as possible Christians, it helps you.
Okay. This firm in the faith, another word that we use for it, or to explain it, unwavering. Don't you appreciate someone who you can know how they're going to be because they always are? And this is positive. You can depend on them. They're unwavering. Troubles come, temptations come, problems come, cares come, anxiety comes. They're there, and they're the same. And it doesn't always have to be them. It can be me, myself, us. See, always unwavering. Okay. So our own problems and sufferings are not unusual. But people everywhere, brethren, in this case, brethren everywhere, have the same, basically, things to deal with. Okay, he goes to verse 10. After you have suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself. All right, speaking of God and this aspect of God, himself will perfect you. Get rid of the idea of I can make myself perfect. No, let God do it. Perfect, confirm, strengthen, establish. All of these go to make us the kind of person, whole person, that God intended that we be. That's perfect, to make us, to perfect us, or the other word is perfect, to make us perfect, which is, in the Scripture, understand that word means complete. God would make us as He wants us to be, complete. We're the unit of, we're a Christian unit. We are there. We have done it through Christ, with God's help. And I stumble around here a little bit. I don't want to leave the idea that we can go off ruining this thing of humility that he's talked about, saying, yeah, I'm perfect. God perfected me, I'm perfect. It's not that kind of, that's human perfect. I'm talking about spiritual perfection that God has brought about in us. He's taken away the sin and left us whole as we ought to be, as He intended we be. Okay. A little while. After you have suffered for a little while. That is telling us there's an end to it. Suffering, if you cannot see the end, it gets pretty tough. If you can see an end to this, we are able to deal with it. Even things that we look back and say, well, I don't know how I got through that, but I did. Well, you got through it because you could see it wasn't going to be forever. It's going to be an end. Well, what if it doesn't end until I die? Yes! I know it's over then, and it's great. If you want to ever try something that is really an exercise in futility, try to threaten Wayne with death. Just, you can't do it. Yeah. I always appreciated a plaque. I don't know if it's there now or where it is. It was a plaque that was always in Rodney Raymond's office. It says, the man does not exist who can discourage me. That's good, isn't it? Yeah, the man does not exist who can discourage me. And he spent a lot of his life doing things that would discourage people. Being a preacher and being a Bible salesman. If you ever want to get the door shut in your face, try either one of those things. And his favorite way was to go out rapping on doors. Now, yeah, okay. For a little while. After you have suffered for a little while. Notice the word little. Doesn't seem like little while. Seems like this has gone on forever. Well, forever in human's eye is for a little while. Okay, anything else here? Yes?
Just Mine is the King James Version, and just there at the end of verse 10, it says that he'll strengthen and settle you, which also to me says that, you know, when we get that anxiety and the call on God many times in my own life to settle me down, just to help me to understand that this isn't as important as I think it is.
You ever told anybody to settle down?
Yeah.
A little guy like me can say, yeah, settle down, and they can say, yeah, make me. You could get away with it. No, serious. Serious. Yeah, to settle down means that we've decided and we're comfortable with this. And we are in ourselves settled down. We're good with it. Mm-hmm. And the word here is establish, but we're established in this, settled in it. Well, folks, we aren't going to quite make it through Peter this morning. Maybe. Let's see. I've got 2 minutes. Okay, he writes the book through Silvanus or Silas. And then, and he says, I've written briefly. Well, to some people, that'd be brief. To Paul, no, that's not. That is brief. Really brief. To others, like John. Anyway, in Peter's eyes, is brief. He exhorted, he testified that this is the true grace of God. Stand firm in it. And the only other thing that's here is she who is in Babylon. Who's that? Where is that? Well, we have different things. She who is in Babylon. One guy wrote here, he says, he does not mean Babylon in Egypt, does not mean a Babylon in Egypt, or in Jerusalem, nor Rome. That is figurative. And this is not figurative. That's what he says. He said, this is the celebrated ancient Babylon in Assyria, which was the metropolis of the eastern dispersion of the Jews. That's where the Jews went during the 70-year dispersion. And many of them stayed, and that became one of their central locations. And he said, that's it. There are a lot of Jews there. And so it was talking about that one. I think that's right, actually. I think that's the case. And another guy wrote, she who is in Babylon, chosen together with you. That's Peter's wife. Now, Peter's wife, whom he led about with him in his missionary journeys. I don't think so. Although he could have been talking about her, he's talking more like about the church that was located there in the actual city of Babylon. Because he was writing to Jews, and so and Peter was over that direction. The only other thing that's here is greet one another with a holy kiss. Kiss of love. Well, this is an older group. I don't have to explain that a lot. If they're at the high school kids in here, I'd be real careful to explain that to them in detail. All right, Lord willing, we'll start with 2 Peter next Lord's Day. Thank you so much.